I love Sundays.
I love Sundays.
I look forward to Sundays all week.
My weeks always go better when I get recharged and refreshed after going to church.
My job is pretty hectic, and the hustle starts again every Monday. But when I go to church on Sundays and I connect with everyone there, I feel more at peace and more focused for the week ahead.
I'm a mom, which means I'm busy, really, really busy. So if I miss a Sunday and I don't take time at church to reset with God and take a break from the chaos, I notice it the following week with my family. It makes a difference when we're there.
I look forward to Sunday all week.
I look forward to Sundays because Sundays help me refocus on things that really matter because I worry about so many things during the week.
There are so many things I spend my time thinking and worrying about, but Sundays always help me to refocus on what actually matters. My week's always so much better when I can refocus and recharge.
No matter what's going on in my life, Sundays is one of the highlights of my week.
No matter what's going on in our lives, we always try to make it on Sunday mornings.
Welcome to the Grove. It's good to see everybody. It's wonderful to be able to be here together and worship with all of you and fellowship with all of you. I had some statistics that I thought I might share with you this morning. I came across these earlier, and it turns out that 46% of fatal accidents, accidents that end in death, occur at home. That's actually one of the most dangerous places you can be. And studies also show that 33% of fatal accidents happen in the vehicle, and a lot of those happen driving to and from work. That's like the most common place for those kind of accidents. 19% of fatal accidents happen elsewhere, wherever you happen to be. But of those 19%, less than 1/10 of 1% of fatal accidents happen at church. So I just thought you might appreciate knowing that you are in the safest place you can be this morning. And if that's not incentive enough for you to attend church, I don't know what is. Oddly enough, though, some people will just go to great lengths not to go to church. People like Bobby, for instance. When Bobby got to the stadium, the football game had already started. And so his buddy asked him, he said, "Why are you so late?" And he said, "Well, I couldn't decide whether to go to church or go to the game." And he said, "Well, what'd you do?" And he said, I flipped a coin. And he said, "Well, that shouldn't have taken so long." He said, "Yeah, I know, but I had to flip it 37 times. At least Bobby flipped the coin, though. Many people today won't even do that. It's so easy to hit the snooze button on Sunday mornings when the alarm sounds at 7 o'clock and just roll over and go back to sleep. Maybe you had every intention of going to church, maybe Sunday school, even, set your clothes out the night before so that you'd have them ready, but, your sleepy side just wins out and you calm your conscience with the thought, next Sunday. And then there's those who just wonder why anyone would even bother with church in the first place. Why get up early on one of your few off days? Why go to the hassle of dressing up and getting the kids ready in the morning? Why sit through another boring service, singing the same old worn-out hymns and listening to another dry, dusty sermon? Well, if you've ever felt that way, I have good news for you. Sundays were never meant to be like that. And at the risk of repeating myself for the third week in a row, Sundays were meant to be the best day of your week. And church, I really believe church ought to be the best hour of our Sundays. When we do church right, Sunday will become the most powerful and peaceful day of the week. And like I mentioned before, one guy that knows all about that is David. If you have your Bible with you this morning, I want to encourage you to open it up to Psalm 122 once again. The first verse of this psalm has been our anchor verse over the past couple of weeks as we've gone through this short series on Sundays, because in this psalm, David writes about a time when somebody invited him to attend church with them. And this is how David responds in Psalm 122, verse 1. He says, "I rejoiced with those who said to me, 'Let us go to the house of the Lord.'" And another translation says that I was glad and when they said to me, "Let's go to the house of the Lord." The idea of going to church actually made David happy. And he was excited about going to church. He was genuinely enthusiastic about going to the house of the Lord. And I think that we should be too. And as David continues through this psalm, he lays out 3 reasons why he was so glad to go to the house of the Lord. The first is the praise of God. The second is the people of God. And third is the peace of God. And these 3 elements, I think, are essential in allowing Sundays to be the best day of your week. Now, last week and the week before, we talked about those first 2 elements, the praise of God, what it means to worship God and why we worship Him and what happens to us when we worship Him on Sundays. And then we talked about the people of God, just having that family of God that we fellowship together with. And then finally, as we move further along in this psalm, David gets to the peace of God. He starts off in verse 1 and 2 describing being invited to the house of the Lord and then standing at its door. And then in verse 3 and 4, he describes all the people gathered there, the tribes of the Lord. At the end of verse 4, he touches on what they do while they're gathered there, namely praising the name of the Lord. And then finally, in the closing verses of the psalm, David writes this in verses 6 through 8. He says, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. May there be peace within your walls and security within your citadels. For the sake of my family and friends, I will say, peace be with you." Now, David talks a lot about peace right here in these last few verses. And he prayed for the peace of his family and friends and everybody that was gathered at the house of the Lord there that day in Jerusalem. The tribes of the Lord gathered at the house of the Lord to praise and worship God. And as they departed, David, waves his hand and he says, peace be with you. And actually the word translated peace be with you there is the Hebrew word shalom. And it was often used as a way of saying goodbye to friends and family. It meant, may the peace of God go with you. May you take that peace with you wherever you go. And in the New Testament, Paul expected peace to be a hallmark of church members. He writes in Colossians 3, verse 15, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body," that is the church body, "you were called to peace." See, in the church we're called to peace, and so we can let that peace reign in our hearts. And I'm convinced that when we do Sundays God's way, we'll experience the peace of God, not just on Sundays, but all week long. And there's 2 ingredients necessary for experiencing the peace of God. First is worship, and the second is rest. A couple of weeks ago at the beginning of this series, we watched the music video from Craig Morgan, What I Love About Sundays. And he touches on both of these elements in the first verse of that song. He says, "That's what I love about Sundays. Sing along as the choir sways. Every verse of Amazing Grace." He's talking about worshiping together with his church. And he says, and then we shake the preacher's hand, go home into your blue jeans, have some chicken and some baked beans, pick a backyard football team, not do much of anything. That's what I love about Sundays. See, it's both of those elements that are important for making Sundays great. You have to have worship and you have to have rest. Now, we already talked a lot about worship in the first week, and so today I want to focus on experiencing the peace of God through rest. Ask any physician and they'll tell you that rest is essential for your physical health. Ask any athlete and they'll tell you that rest is essential for building muscles and growing stronger and getting better. When your body is deprived of sleep, you're unable to rebuild and recharge yourself adequately. Rest is needed for physical muscles to repair themselves and to prevent injury. Your body requires rest. And the same is true for your soul. Sundays give us the opportunity to rest, refuel, and recharge our spiritual batteries. The problem is, in our frenzied culture, there are just too many things to do. Too many demands, too many responsibilities, too many bills to pay, too much urgency. No one can afford to take time to rest in today's results-oriented culture. And that lifestyle, that hectic pace has caused damage to our quality of life. You know, we run faster and we work harder, but we just keep falling further behind. Our lives have become too full, too out of balance. There's just no margin anymore. We need to have that day of rest where we can recharge and refocus on God and on what really matters in life. You know, way back at the beginning of time, the Bible says that God created the heavens and the earth. And after that, after He had created, you know, life, the universe, and everything, the Bible says in Genesis chapter 2, by the seventh day, God had finished the work that He had been doing. And so on the seventh day, He rested from all His work. And then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it He rested from all the work of creating that He had done. Now I know, like me, you've probably read that verse a dozen times, maybe more than that in your life. But have you ever stopped to wonder why God rested? I mean, did He rest because He was tired? I mean, of course not. I mean, He's God. He doesn't get tired. He has limitless energy at His disposal. See, I think the reason that God rested on the seventh day was because He knew that we would need a day of rest every week. And He wanted us to see how important that was. So He set the example Himself. In fact, God's example became the basis for the fourth commandment. You guys know the 10 Commandments, right? Well, the fourth one says this in Exodus 20, verse 8 through 10. Remember to keep the Sabbath holy, that is the seventh day. Work and get everything done during 6 days each week. But the seventh day is a day of rest to honor the Lord your God. And on that day, no one may do any work. Now, this might sound like a whole new concept to some of us who struggle with that. It was a whole new concept to the Israelites, too. I mean, prior to this, the Israelites had been slaves in Egypt. I mean, they were accustomed to hard labor. They worked day in and day out. They didn't have a day off. And so God actually had to train them how to rest. And He did that with food. Food seems to be a pretty good motivator for most of us. And so he used food to teach them how to rest. Every single morning, God would provide them with food as they were wandering around in the wilderness, waiting to move into the promised land. He provided them with manna and then eventually with quail. But what happened was this stuff would just appear in the morning, and He would say, go out and gather as much as you need for just one day. Just one day's worth. And then the next morning they would go out there and they would do the same thing, gather as much as they need for that one day. Every day they just did one day's worth of work. They learned to trust God, to depend on Him to provide for the next day. But then on the sixth day, they collected twice as much. That way they could have the next day off. They didn't have to work that day. They didn't have to do anything special on that day. They could just sit back and rest. And, today as Christians, we're no longer slavishly bound by the civil and ceremonial laws of the Old Testament. But you and I still need a day of rest just as much as they did. You study the history of Christianity, and I think that you'll see that whenever people have taken time and set that time aside for a day of rest and refocus on God, their lives have gone better. They've felt better about themselves. They've enjoyed their families more and experienced the smile of God. Once upon a time in our country, everything just stopped on Sundays. Businesses closed down, stores were not open. People went to church and worshiped God and then ate together and hung out together. They rested and relaxed together all through the afternoon. Sunday wasn't an extra day to get things done or a bonus day to get your kids in these high impact activities so that they can get ahead. Sunday was a day of rest and worship. And I think people had a greater sense of peace back then, don't you? I mean, if you're like me, you're probably thinking, okay, that sounds great. I would love that, but there's always that but. You don't know my schedule. You don't know how busy I am. I've got this to do and that to do. And life is just like that. We live in this nonstop society. We've got cell phones in our pockets and tablets in our hands, and we're always connected to work and school and friends and family and everything else all at the same time. We've got priorities at home and projects at work and a whole plethora of extracurricular activities going on all the time. And a lot of us just get this sense that we can get ahead faster or we can accomplish more if we're productive 7 days a week. If we just fill up every day, then we're going to be more effective in life. But that's not how God made us. Can you tell me, anybody know what the most prosperous fast food chain in America is? Anybody know? It's not McDonald's. It's not Subway. It's not Burger King. It's not Taco Bell. It's Chick-fil-A. You might know that? And what's so special and different about Chick-fil-A? What sets them apart? They sell chicken. No, Chick-fil-A, and we don't have one around here nearby, so some of you might not be used to it. But Chick-fil-A is closed on Sundays. And my son's right there opening one up in Springfield here pretty soon. But Chick-fil-A, they're closed on Sundays. And so they do more business in 6 days than all of these other fast food chains do in 7. They make more money by being closed 1 day a week. And you know why they're closed 1 day a week? They get that question a lot, I guess, because they have it posted on their Facebook page and their website. And this is the statement that they have. Our founder, Truett Cathy, made the decision to close on Sundays in 1946 when he first opened his first restaurant in Naperville, Georgia. He has often shared that his decision was as much practical as spiritual. He believes that all franchise Chick-fil-A operators and their restaurant employees should have an opportunity to rest, spend time with family and friends, and worship if they choose to do so. That's why all Chick-fil-A restaurants are closed on Sundays, and they say it's part of our recipe for success. And I think it's working out pretty well for them, don't you? They do in 6 days what everybody else can't do in 7. And I think that tells us something. That tells me something. When you have good Sundays, you have better Mondays and better Tuesdays and Wednesdays and the whole rest of the week for that matter. When Sunday is a day of rest and worship, your whole week just goes better. In fact, your whole life goes better. I've got some more statistics that you might find interesting. And this is a collection from a bunch of different studies that have been done by secular sociologists. These are not Christians who have come up with these numbers or anything like that. These are just sociologists who've been studying the effects of church attendance on society and on individual people, and they found some interesting things. Number one, people who attend church regularly typically live 7.5 years longer than those who don't. So if you ever feel like you just don't have time to take a day off and go to church, truth is you're going to have a whole lot more time if you do. 7.5 years longer you're going to live. They've also found that people who attend church are 56% more likely to have an optimistic, positive outlook on life than those who don't. And I want to be positive about life, don't you? Just have a good attitude and feel like life is good. They found that they are 27% less likely to be depressed. They're 35% less likely to get divorced. And that's an important statistic because for years I think our preachers have been lying to us. I've heard over and over growing up that the divorce rates in the church are the same as outside the church. That's not true. That's true if you base your numbers on self-identified Christians. Everyone who takes a survey and marks the box Christian. That's a lot of people who don't go to church. If you look at people who go to church, divorce rates are 35%. That's a huge chunk. 50% for the average, that's in the 20s for people that go to church. That's a big difference. And that same study found that church attenders have a higher level of commitment to their partner. They're less likely to cheat on their spouse. Higher levels of marital satisfaction. They just say they're happy with their husband or their wife. Lower levels of negative interactions. They don't fight as much. And another study found that people who attend church regularly get higher grades in high school and in college. They practice better time management, and they experience a better sex life. So if any of those are things that you're interested in, then you're in the right place. Why do I love Sundays, and why do I think you should too? Well, I love Sundays because I love the praise of God. I love being able to worship Him, to look up toward God and just lift praises to Him. I love Sundays because I love the people of God, connecting with God's family week after week and building those relationships. And I love Sundays because I love the peace of God. And if you didn't notice, the first one of those is upward, the second one is outward, and the third one is inward. And when we combine all of those elements together, that's when Sunday will become the best day of your week, just like God intended for it to be. So whether this is your first time visiting the Grove, or you've been a member here so long that there's a pew worn in the shape of your bottom somewhere, I hope that you can say along with David, I rejoiced with those who said to me, let's go to the house of the Lord. And just like last week, I want to encourage those of you who already love Sundays to share this message with someone who needs it. You know, it'll be on YouTube later today, and you can post that on your Facebook page or email it to a friend. But also, you know, maybe you're new to the Grove, or maybe you've just kind of been testing out the waters for a little while. I want to invite you to make Blooming Grove your church home. Together we can praise the name of God, we can connect with the people of God, and we can experience the peace of God. And in so doing, we'll make Sundays the best day of the week. And if there's anything I can do to help you make that happen this morning, I want to invite you to talk to me. You can pull me aside after church, or call me at home. My cell phone number is on the back of the bulletin. Or you can just come forward now while we stand and sing together. Let's sing, church.